This story is titled, My Parents Called Me a Failure and Disowned Me for Leaving Law School. Later they lost everything and begged for money, so I bought their house and made them my tenants. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys! I'm not usually the one to share my personal drama, but I feel like this has been eating at me for too long, and maybe putting it out there will help. My family situation has always been, let's just say, complicated, but things have hit a new level of awkward lately. So here's the thing. I grew up being that kid. You know, the one with all the expectations piled on. My dad, 55 male, was this big-shot lawyer, owned his own firm, always wore those tailored suits that screamed, I'm better than you. My mom, 50 female, was right there by his side, the queen of charity galas, dinner parties, and whatever else rich people do to stay in the spotlight. Together, they had this whole vibe of perfect family, and they made sure me and my brother James, now 28 male, were part of that picture. But it didn't work out for me. Dad had my life planned out before I even knew what I wanted. I was their smart kid, so obviously I had to be a lawyer too. He'd say stuff like, you'll take over the firm one day. Think of the legacy. Legacy? I was 12. Meanwhile, Mom would talk about how proud she'd be when I followed in Dad's footsteps. She'd say, your father has worked so hard to build this. It's only right that you continue the tradition. But there was one small issue. I hated everything about law. I mean, the idea of sitting in a courtroom or reading legal contracts sounded like torture. What I did love, though, was coffee. Sounds random, I know. Back then, being a barista was not a common thing yet. Most of the time during holidays, I was in the kitchen with my little French press, trying to make the perfect cup. My parents didn't care. They thought it was just some dumb hobby. The only person who got me was Aunt Lisa, 62 female, my dad's older sister. Lisa was nothing like my parents. She was chill, worked as a librarian, and always seemed to have time to listen. She'd say stuff like, the world needs people who love what they do. Don't let anyone tell you what your passion should be. She was my safe space, the one person I could talk to without feeling judged. High school is when the cracks really started to show. I started talking about my dream of opening a coffee shop, and my parents lost it. I remember one dinner where I casually brought it up, saying something like, I think it'd be cool to own a cafe someday. Dad put down his fork, stared at me, and said, no son of mine is going to waste his life making coffee. Mom didn't even look up from her plate, just muttered, don't embarrass yourself. It wasn't just the big blow-ups either. It was the small digs, the constant pressure. Focus on what matters, they'd say. Or, stop wasting time with these silly distractions. James, my brother, was their golden boy. He was already on track for law school, doing all the things they wanted me to do. They'd say, why can't you be more like James? That hurt more than I'll admit. Aunt Lisa was my only cheerleader. I'd vent to her, and she'd remind me that I didn't have to live my life for other people. She told me, if coffee makes you happy, go for it. You can't spend your life chasing their approval. By the time I got to college, I was completely under their thumb. They pushed me into pre-law, and I went along with it because honestly, I was scared. Scared of disappointing them, of losing their approval. Things were way worse than just feeling stuck. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. My life was all about reading case briefs, highlighting textbooks, and pretending I cared about torts or whatever else they were throwing at us. Meanwhile, the panic attacks got worse. I couldn't sleep most nights, and when I did, I'd wake up in cold sweats thinking about deadlines or exams. There was this one day in particular. I still remember it so clearly. It was the middle of my last year, and I was sitting in this cafe near campus, trying to cram for finals. I wasn't even looking at my notes. I was just staring at the baristas behind the counter. They were moving around like it was some kind of choreographed dance, pulling espresso shots, steaming milk, chatting with customers. They looked happy, like they actually liked what they were doing. A middle-aged man, Mike, 35 male, who appeared to be the owner, noticed me zoning out and came over. He was this super chill guy, the kind of person who instantly makes you feel at ease. He asked if I was okay, and I guess I looked as miserable as I felt because I just blurted out, I hate law school. Mike laughed and said, well, what do you actually like? I told him about my obsession with coffee, how I'd been watching endless videos of latte art and experimenting with brewing methods since I was a kid, and how I always dreamed of opening a shop someday. Instead of laughing or telling me to grow up, he said, why don't you? I had no answer, just excuses. I told him about my parents and their expectations, and he shook his head. Man, life's too short to live it for other people. If coffee's your thing, go for it. It's hard work, but if you're passionate, it's worth it. That conversation lit something inside me. You know, I was young and only needed a push to start. I started hanging out at the cafe more often, asking questions, watching how Mike ran the place. He even let me try my hand at making drinks during slow hours. Of course, I couldn't keep this from Aunt Lisa. I told her everything and she was over the moon. "This is your chance," she said. "You've always known what you wanted. Now it's time to fight for it." She was right, but the thought of facing my parents with this was terrifying. So I made the decision. I will leave law school. So, I spent a few nights rehearsing how I'd tell my parents. I thought if I chose the right words, kept my tone calm, and explained everything, they'd at least try to understand. I knew they wouldn't be thrilled, but I figured they'd hear me out. So I prepared a whole presentation, and that was stupidly optimistic. I showed up at the house on a Saturday morning. Mom was in the kitchen. Dad was at the dining table, going over some paperwork. I walked in and sat down across from him. My heart was racing, but I tried to look composed. "Can we talk? I have something to show you," I said, clearing my throat. Dad didn't even glance up. "Make it quick. I've got a meeting in an hour." Mom stopped fussing with her flowers and turned to look at me, a bit curious. "What's going on?" she asked. I sat down and projected the slides on TV, showing market trends, successful cafes, and how profitable they could be. I even had a business plan. I thought, if I can just show them I've thought this through, maybe they'll see I'm serious. It didn't even take 5 minutes for Dad to explode. "What is all this nonsense for? Tell us what you want." He was ready to fight. I took a deep breath. "I've decided to leave law school." He slammed his pen down and leaned back in his chair, staring at me like I just told him I'd robbed a bank. "What the hell are you talking about?" he said, his voice sharp. "I've thought about this for months," I said, trying to stay calm. "Law isn't for me. It's making me miserable. I've found something I'm passionate about, and I want to pursue it." Mom crossed her arms, already looking annoyed. "Passionate about what, exactly? What could possibly be more important than the career you've been working toward?" I hesitated for a second, but there was no point in dancing around it. "I want to open a coffee shop." For a moment, there was complete silence. Dad's face turned red, and then he burst out laughing, the kind that's laced with disbelief and anger. "A coffee shop? Are you kidding me? This is some kind of joke, right?" "It's not a joke," I said firmly. "I've been learning everything I can about the industry. I have a business plan." And he cut me off. "A business plan? Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea how much we've invested in your education? And now you want to throw it all away to become a glorified barista?" "Dad, it's not about the money," I tried to explain. "I'm miserable in law school. I've been miserable for years. This is the first time I felt like I know what I want to do with my life." "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped. "Do you know how many sacrifices we've made to give you these opportunities? And this is how you repay us? By chasing some ridiculous pipe dream?" Mom was so disappointed. "Do you even realize how embarrassing this is for us? What are we supposed to tell people? That our son gave up a prestigious career to make lattes?" I felt my frustration bubbling over, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to defend what I truly wanted, and they can't stop me. "This isn't about you," I said, louder than I intended. "This is about me and what I want for my life. I'm not going to waste my time doing something I hate just to make you look good." Dad stood up, towering over me. "Don't you dare talk to us like that. We've done nothing but support you, and this is the thanks we get? You're selfish, ungrateful, and frankly, a disgrace." "That's not fair," I shot back, standing up too. "I never asked for this. You decided what my life should look like without even asking what I wanted. I'm not going to fulfill your dreams, and I'm done living for your approval." Mom put her hands on her hips, shaking her head. "You're being ridiculous. Do you even have any idea how hard it is to run a business? You'll fail. And then what? Are we supposed to pick up the pieces when you come crawling back?" "I don't need you to pick up anything," I yelled, my voice cracking. "I've been doing this on my own for months now. Learning, working, saving up. I can handle it." Dad's voice dropped, cold and sharp. "If you walk out of that school, you're not my son anymore, and I don't know you. You'll be on your own, completely." I didn't expect things would reach to that. I was shocked, but I held my ground. "If that's what it takes, fine," I said, my voice trembling. "I'd rather be on my own than spend the rest of my life living a lie." I looked at my mom, and I thought I saw a flicker of emotion in Mom's eyes, but she quickly turned away. "Do whatever you want," she said quietly, "but don't expect us to support you when this blows up in your face." I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. Just as I was about to leave, Dad called out, Don't come crawling back when this all goes to hell. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. I turned back, my hand on the doorknob. Maybe, I said, but at least it'll be my mistake. And then I left. That day felt like a blur. I drove around aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't just a fight, it was a complete severing of ties. I wasn't their son anymore. I ended up at Aunt Lisa's place. She opened the door and took one look at me before pulling me into a hug. They didn't take it well, huh? She said softly. That's an understatement, I replied. She let me crash on her couch that night, and for the next few weeks, she became my anchor. She didn't sugarcoat things. She told me it would be hard, that I'd have to work my ass off to make this dream a reality. But she also reminded me that I wasn't alone. They'll regret this someday, she said one night as we sipped tea in her tiny living room. They'll see what you're capable of, and when they do, you'll be the one calling the shots. I didn't know if she was right, but her belief in me was enough to keep me going. With that, my life felt like a mix of freedom and chaos. On one hand, I finally had control over my future. On the other hand, I was broke, emotionally drained, and living out of Aunt Lisa's tiny guest room. It was a humbling experience, to say the least. But as hard as it was, I had some hope. So I got a job at a local cafe. Mike, the owner who'd inspired me back in law school, gave me a shot as a part-time barista. I'll never forget that first shift. I was nervous as hell, fumbling with the espresso machine and spilling milk all over the counter. But Mike was patient. It's all about rhythm, he said, showing me how to steam milk without turning it into a bubbly mess. Once you find your flow, it'll feel natural. It took a few weeks, but I got the hang of it, and I loved it. The smell of freshly ground coffee, the hum of conversations in the background, the satisfaction of handing someone a drink and seeing their face light up, it all felt right in a way that law school never did. I threw myself into the work, volunteering for extra shifts and staying late to learn everything I could about the business. Mike became my unofficial mentor, teaching me about everything from inventory management to customer service. But working part-time wasn't enough to save up for my own place, let alone a coffee shop. So, I took a second job as a delivery driver. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My days started at 5 a.m., making lattes and cappuccinos, and ended around midnight after my last delivery run. Some nights I was so tired I'd collapse on Aunt Lisa's couch without even taking off my shoes. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered why I was doing this. Aunt Lisa was my biggest cheerleader during this time. She'd leave little notes for me, saying things like, "Keep going, you're closer than you think." She even helped me create a budget, mapping out how much I needed to save for a small shop. "Start small," she said. "You don't need a fancy location, just something that feels like you." After about a year of grinding, I had enough savings to start looking for spaces. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s, but it was a start. Mike introduced me to a friend of his, a real estate agent who specialized in commercial properties. That's how I found it, a tiny, rundown space in a humble part of town. The rent was dirt cheap, and the place needed a ton of work, but I saw the potential. I signed the lease and officially became the owner of my first coffee shop. The next few months were a blur of renovations and endless to-do lists. I spent every spare minute painting walls, assembling furniture, and scrubbing floors. Aunt Lisa helped me decorate, adding little touches like potted plants and quirky signs that gave the place personality. Mike donated an old espresso machine and a few pieces of equipment, which saved me a ton of money, and I opened my first coffee shop. The first year was tough. There were days when I barely broke even, and I had to get creative to keep the business afloat. I started hosting community events. Slowly but surely, word started to spread. Regulars began showing up, and I got to know their orders, their stories, their quirks. It wasn't just a coffee shop anymore, it was a community. By the second year, things were picking up. I was finally able to hire a small team, and for the first time in years, I wasn't working 16-hour days. I even started thinking about expanding. A second location felt like a pipe dream at first, but when a space opened up in a nearby neighborhood, I jumped on it. This time, I had more experience and resources, so the process was a little smoother. Within a few months, I had a second shop up and running. Now, 4 years later, I own 5 locations. Each one has its own vibe, but they all share the same heart. Good coffee, good people, and a welcoming atmosphere. I've got an amazing team who feels more like family than employees, and a loyal group of customers who've been with me since the beginning. Some days, I walk into one of my shops and can't believe how far I've come. Meanwhile, my parents' world was falling apart. Dad's firm, which had been a symbol of success and stability for so long, started crumbling. He'd taken on some high-profile cases to boost his reputation, but they ended up being financial disasters. Aunt Lisa kept me updated, though I tried not to dwell on it. I wasn't looking for revenge or validation. I just wanted to focus on building my life. But then came the news I wasn't expecting. Their house was in jeopardy. Aunt Lisa called me one night and said, "Your parents are about to lose the house. The bank's giving them 60 days to come up with the money, or they're out." I didn't know what to say. For years, they'd ignored me, written me off, and now they were the ones in trouble. "Iki, they called me earlier," Aunt Lisa said, breaking the silence. "They're desperate. They asked if I could loan them the money, but you know I don't have that kind of cash." She paused, giving me a careful look. "They're going to call you next." I scoffed. "Why? So they can tell me I'm a failure again?" "Pass. Think about it," she said. "You've built a life for yourself. You're in a position to help if that's what you want to do. But don't feel obligated, okay? Just take some time to decide." She was right. I needed to think. So when their call came the next day, I let it go to voicemail. And the next one. And the next. It wasn't until the fourth message, when my mom's voice cracked as she said, "Please, just call us back," that I finally caved. When I called, they both answered, speaking at the same time. My dad started with, "We need to talk," while my mom blurted out, "We're sorry." It was so strange to hear them apologizing after years of silence. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a long pause before my mom said, "We're about to lose the house. We need your help." "And why would I help you?" I asked. "You made it pretty clear I wasn't part of this family anymore." "That was a mistake," Dad said, his tone stiff. "We were wrong to say those things. But this is about the house, not the past. We need $150,000 to pay off the debt, or the bank's going to foreclose." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the sheer audacity. "Let me get this straight. You disowned me, called me a disgrace, erased me from your lives, and now you want me to bail you out? You've got to be kidding." "Please, just listen," Mom said. "We don't have anywhere else to turn. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." "Oh, it's serious," I said, my anger boiling over. "Serious is what happens when you throw your kid out because he doesn't fit into your perfect little mold. Serious is building a life from scratch while you sit in your fancy house pretending I don't exist. And now you want me to fix your mess? Unbelievable. We're not asking for charity. We'll pay you back. We just need time." Dad said. "I don't think you understand how this works," I said. "You don't get to rewrite history because it's convenient for you now. You burned that bridge, remember?" There was silence on the other end. Finally, my mom said, "We know we hurt you. We were wrong. But you're still our son. Can't we start over?" I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to hang up and never speak to them again. But another part of me, the part that remembered Aunt Lisa's words about building my life on my terms, felt like this was a chance to take back control. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up before they could say anything else. Over the next few days, I weighed my options. I knew I could afford to help them. The business was doing well, and I had the money. But I wasn't going to just hand it over. If I did this, it would be on my terms, not theirs. I talked it over with Aunt Lisa, who, as always, gave me solid advice. "You have every right to say no," she said. "But if you decide to help, make sure it's on your terms. Protect yourself." I had a plan, and here is how it went. I met with my financial advisor and laid out a plan. Instead of giving them the money outright, I'd buy the house. That way, I could ensure they wouldn't lose it, but I wouldn't be risking my own financial stability either. When I called my parents to tell them, Dad sounded relieved until I explained the terms. "I'll buy the house outright," I said. "You'll stay as tenants and pay rent. It'll be a modest amount, something you can afford. But if you miss payments or try to manipulate me, I won't hesitate to evict you." "What?" Dad snapped. "You're going to make us your tenants? That's absurd. It's this or nothing," I said firmly. "I'm not handing you $150,000 to gamble with. This is the only way I'm willing to help." Mom tried to play the guilt card. "We're your parents. How can you treat us like this? How can I treat you like this? Do you even hear yourselves? After everything you've done, you're lucky I'm even picking up the phone." "This is selfish," Dad said angrily. "You're taking advantage of our situation to humiliate us." "No, I'm giving you a lifeline. Take it or leave it." After a long, tense pause, they agreed. I could hear the resentment in Dad's voice, but I didn't care. This wasn't about making them happy. It was about doing what was right for me. A few weeks later, the paperwork was finalized, and I officially became the owner of the house I'd grown up in. The irony wasn't lost on me. The kid who'd been kicked out was now the landlord. The first time I walked into the house after officially becoming the owner, it felt weird. I wasn't sure if I should feel triumphant or just numb. This was the place where I'd grown up, where I'd had birthday parties as a kid, where my parents had screamed at me and told me I was dead to them. Now, it was mine. Legally, anyway. My parents were sitting in the living room when I arrived. Mom was staring out the window, and Dad was pretending to read a newspaper, though I could tell he wasn't focused on it. They looked up when I walked in, and the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "I'll need your signatures on these," I said, holding up the lease agreement. I'd made it as simple as possible. A modest rent, enough to cover maintenance and property taxes, nothing that would crush them financially. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just wanted boundaries. Mom glanced at the papers and frowned. "You're really going through with this?" "Yes," I said, my tone firm. "This is how it has to be." Dad snatched the papers and started flipping through them, muttering under his breath. "You think you've got all the power now, don't you?" he said, glaring at me. I didn't take the bait. "This isn't about power, it's about protecting myself. You need a place to live, and I've given you one. All I ask is that you hold up your end of the deal." "Your end of the deal?" Dad repeated sarcastically. "You talk like this is some business transaction. We're your parents." "Funny how that works," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "You didn't seem too concerned about being my parents when you kicked me out." Mom flinched, but Dad just shook his head. "We made mistakes. You don't have to keep throwing it in our faces." "Well, now you get to benefit from your mistake, and I'm not throwing anything," I said. "I'm just setting boundaries. This is how it's going to be. If you can't handle that, I'm happy to sell the house and let the new owner deal with it." Mom looked at Dad, who was suddenly quiet. They both knew I wasn't bluffing. After a long pause, Dad grabbed a pen and signed the papers. "Fine," he said, shoving them back at me. Mom hesitated for a moment, then followed suit. "We'll pay the rent," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "Good," I said, tucking the papers into my folder. "That's all I need." The first few months were awkward, to say the least. They paid the rent on time, but the relationship between us was strained. They'd make little passive-aggressive comments when I visited to check on the house. Mom would say things like, "We never thought we'd end up like this," or, "I hope you're happy." Dad was more direct, accusing me of taking advantage of their situation. "You could have just given us the money," he said one day, when I stopped by to fix a leaky faucet. "You didn't have to humiliate us like this." I set down my wrench and looked at him. "I didn't do this to humiliate you. I did it to protect myself. You don't get to rewrite history just because you're uncomfortable with how things turned out." He didn't say anything after that, but I could tell he was stewing. Meanwhile, Aunt Lisa was my saving grace. She kept reminding me that I'd made the right choice. "They might never admit it," she said, "but you did more for them than they ever did for you. Don't let their guilt trips get to you." She wasn't wrong. Every time I started doubting myself, I'd remind myself that I'd built this life on my terms. I'd earned the right to protect what I'd worked for. One day, a few months after the lease was signed, Mom called me. "Can you come over for dinner?" she asked. I hesitated. "Why?" "We need to talk," she said. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived, dinner was already on the table. We sat down, exchanged a few awkward pleasantries, and then Mom cut to the point. "We need to talk about the rent," she said. "What about it?" I asked. "It's too much. We can't keep paying that amount every month. You need to lower it." I stared at her. "Lower it? It's already barely covering the costs. You're paying less than what the property taxes alone are." She leaned forward. "We're your parents. We shouldn't have to pay rent at all. It's wrong, and you know it. You could help us more." "You're serious?" I said. "I bought the house so you wouldn't lose it. I didn't have to do that. I could have let the bank take it, but I didn't. And now you're saying that's not enough?" "We raised you," she said, her voice hardening. "We sacrificed for you, and you're making us pay to live in our own home? It's disgraceful." Dad, who'd been silent until then, added, "She's right. You could have just given us the money outright. This whole landlord-tenant arrangement is humiliating." I clenched my fists under the table. "I'm not your personal ATM. I gave you a roof over your heads when no one else would. You don't get to guilt me into more. This is the deal. Take it or leave it." "You're being unreasonable," Mom said. "We're asking for basic decency, not a handout." "No," I said, standing up. "You're demanding more than I've already given, and I'm not going to do it. If you don't like the terms, you're free to move out." They didn't say anything as I left. I didn't wait for them to start. I knew I'd done the right thing, but it didn't make it easier. It's hard when the people who are supposed to care about you the most can't seem to stop talking. Things aren't perfect now, but they're better. They still pay rent, and I still maintain the house. But the conversations are less tense, and the resentment has started to fade. I don't care if they like it or not. They didn't pay that attention to me back in the day. For now, though, I'm just focusing on the life I've built. A life I'm proud of, one that's completely mine. And that's more than enough. Thanks for reading, you guys. Honestly, just putting this out there feels like a weight off my chest. Let me know what you think. I'm curious if you'd handle it the same way, or if I'm completely off base here.